raw chicken, the best ultrasound simulation you can ever use to train. Through the vein rolls away, then you're gonna rip that catheter and shear it. All right, so here is my setup for what I think is going to be the best ultrasound simulation you can ever use to train. Raw chicken or turkey, whichever you like to use. The reason why I like the raw chicken is because I can control the depth, the direction, and overlaying of multiple veins or vessels I want to simulate. It also feels a lot more realistic to real tissue needle insertion. The way that you can move and re-navigate the needle is more realistic. There's a lot more control over this, and also the visualization is pretty much the same as a real insertion. And it's only $10 for each chicken. I don't know, $3 for balloons. We're gonna go over the equipment right now. So I have just 2 chicken breasts. I have a 60cc syringe. You don't need 60, you can use 10, whatever, doesn't matter. This is a sewing needle. The tunneling rod will not be in the list of links, but this is an extra tunneling rod that I kept and cleaned after one of my procedures so that I can use it for demo. These are just regular long balloons. This is a rocket balloon, a little bit bigger to simulate the internal jugular vein for our central line insertions. You want a probe cover to keep that probe clean because this stuff is quite nasty, and especially if you have it in your mouth. And then various needles. We're gonna go over different needles and how they look like in the simulation. So let's go over that real quick. I'm gonna show you how to apply the balloons and drive it through the tissue of the chicken so you can use it for sims. So I take the closed end of the long balloon and I hold it at the edge and I'll drive it to wherever I want it to start. So this will be our deep vein insertion. So we're gonna go way under, drive it through, drive it through, drive it through. This is going to be our deep insertion, and then I'm going to do a shallow insertion. So let's do it, I don't know, long ways like that, super shallow. I'm going to take the ends. I know this sewing needle feels sharp, but it will not cut through the balloon. Now the shallow vein is going to be a lot more difficult. It's almost like real tunneling. You don't want to get a balance between real super shallow needling versus too deep. So you got to balance out too deep versus too shallow. And so we drive it however deep or shallow you want to go. It's up to you. That's what I like about this system and setup, is that I can control it so that if one of my clinicians or people I'm precepting has a difficult time doing these shallow insertions or deep insertions, we can practice those scenarios. We're not bound by whatever the manufacturer decides to make. And then let's make this one about mid, but crossing the 2 veins. I'm going to use the bent tunneling rod to go do a little bit of a curvature, get a different change in direction from here. How about like that? And then like so. There we go. A little bit of a curvature there. So here are my veins set. From here, I'm going to do a couple things. I've actually pulled too much water. You want a little bit left to be able to suck out air. So air is the enemy of ultrasound. You do not want air present, so you need to suck all that out. Look at that, all that bubbling. So we're gonna inject. So I just go back and forth to try to get all that air out. Good. And then you can add as much venous pressure as you want. Just be careful not to pop it off and get the liquid in your mouth. Ooh, that's gross. Then you tie it off. And shout out to my friends in Brazil for showing me this. This was very eye-opening. Thank you guys. You've taught me as much as I've taught you. All right, so same thing with this one. I want to suck in as much air, get rid of all that extra air out of the balloon. The slower you go, the better. If you try to quickly aspirate air, you may close that opening before you fully removed everything. Then of course, there we go. So after I fill it, the faster I pull and aspirate, the more of the air bubbles you'll get rid of. You're gonna hear that turbulence in the balloon when you hear the air. When the air bubbles are all sucked out, you won't hear as much of that noise, that bubbling noise. All right, so now let's insert. And we're looking at our image. Look at that. Beautiful. You can see the twin veins right next to each other. And then when we cross over, you can see that superficial, very shallow vein crossing over like that. Okay, and you can see that other vein crossing over the deep vein. So let's go ahead and try to insert for one of these. Let's start with a deep vein. There we go. So that's about a 2 centimeter depth. That's not too terrible. The bigger the piece of meat that you can use, the more variations in depth you can deal with and simulate. So let's go ahead and we're going to center up that needle insertion. Yeah, look at that. So there's my needle tip. And notice how I automatically fanned it. Let's not fan it. Let's keep it perpendicular to the vein mass. See what happens. Okay, I'm already pretty far in deep and I didn't even catch it. And so what I'm going to do at this point is I found my needle tip and I'm going to advance the probe, advance the needle, advance the probe, advance the needle, advance the probe. Okay, now there's this black blurb. I don't know where my vein is or where it starts and where it ends. On the edges on the left, I can see it on the right. So what I'm going to do is now balance that probe, fanning back to being perpendicular to the vein. And then I'm readjusting my insertion angle. And you can see the head of that needle, and I'm moving my probe till it disappears, and I'm going to chase after that venous direction. And then I'm going to advance the catheter. Okay, there it is. So this is such a better simulator. Let's look at the vein longitudinally and see what's going on here. There we go. I can see my catheter, and then I can probably, let's watch the needle retract completely. There it is. All right. So there is an example of a deep vein insertion. Let's do a shallow insertion. So here's my gel tower trick that I show people for shallow. Well, if it's so shallow, then we're not going to use ultrasound. You do you, boo. Whatever you want to do, but I want to make sure that I don't ruin my perfect record. So I will navigate that needle all the way down to the shallow vein with my ultrasound to ensure that I don't miss. And if the vein rolls away, then I will have an opportunity to adjust because I was using ultrasound. So, do you notice the height of this gel? And you could even have it higher if you like. Don't touch it in real life, but just to emphasize the height of the gel. The height of the gel gives me more margin of error, a bigger buffer of a mistake if I don't immediately hover my needle on top. Navigate the needle before I hit the skin, before the patient feels pain, and I can get right into that vein quicker. So I'm going to insert the needle in the gel medium without touching the skin. Do you guys see that? It's a little hazy. Do you guys see that needle tip on the ultrasound? Look at that. You can see the needle, and make sure you're at the tip. You can see the needle. You can see that needle moving before I touch the skin. Now I'm touching the skin, but I can navigate that needle before I touch the skin. I know now I'm right on top of the vein, and then I'm going to insert and then follow it through. You guys see that movement? See that tip? And now I'm going to puncture. Is that backwards? No. And then pop that vein. Shallow out. And then advance. And then navigate. And then you can go ahead and advance if you like right there. There we go. So gel tower trick, create a tall column of gel so that you can navigate the needle before you actually touch the skin. This also works with blood draws as well. There we go, right there. There's my needle. I'm navigating my needle tip before I even touch the skin. Then I'm gonna pierce. Now I'm in. And then I can redirect. Another technique you can use is get right next to the skin, but go ahead and try to puncture it, but let's say it rolled away. Let's find our needle tip here. There it is. It rolled out of the way, and what you can do is from here, enter from the side instead of worrying about trying to enter from the top. So here I have no more room to move forward or advance that needle. So here, I'm going to rotate that needle, and then that'll give me a little bit more sliding room before I advance that catheter. There it is. Nice and sitting well in the vein itself. And do you see how the veins go in and out? It's deep and shallow, deep and shallow. This is realistic. This is more realistic because the veins, as you know, don't stay in one depth. They change in depth over time. All right, so that's one way to do it. So 4.5 centimeter. This is a little bit shorter than the 6.4. Another thing that people ask frequently is, how do I stabilize the probe? The probe is so difficult to hold and stabilize. You need 3 points of contact. I have my elbow and my wrist on a solid surface. And then I have my pinky and the probe. So 1, 2. So when I'm doing this, I have my pinky 1, my probe 2, and my wrist 3. So there are 3 points of contact that I have on the subject while I'm holding the probe, so I can control it a lot better. There it is. All right, so another thing to be mindful of is when you guys are inserting, the shallowest appropriate angle, but if you don't have enough of a needle length, you're not gonna be able to tap or get to that enough. So let's say we have right there on the right, and then I puncture here. Great, I've got great blood return, great access. I'm going to cannulate here. The problem with this, how many centimeters of vein purchase is that? That's about only 1 to 2. Look at how much this skin, I'm gonna move the needle back. This chicken, now we only have about 0.25, 0.5. And that's just from moving this chicken. So you want to be mindful of how much vein purchase you have, and to do that you have to have long enough needles, long enough catheters to reach that vein properly. So one more thing I'm going to show you is how the Guidewire AST system looks like when you're inserting. So say we've got this system here. Let's go ahead and insert. Going in, you see that needle in the vein. And right when you get the needle in the vein, you want to advance the guide wire. You can even see the curl of that wire to prevent any perforations. There we go, beautiful. And it slides through. And after it slides through all the way, very good, nice and smooth. Now, that guide wire is going to guide the catheter to a smooth transition at a smooth angle into the vein. So these are great for those curvy, windy veins where you're not sure if it's going to pass through or if the catheter might not be resting. Let's transition to the IJ. And let's simulate this catheter shearing that a lot of people are doing. I've done it before too, I totally understand, and this is what's happening. There we go. So let's go ahead and let's say we insert at a high angle because it was a very deep vein and we wanted to get to it. There we go, we've punctured the vein. We're in, great, it feels good, but I have to, if I let go of this angle, I'm gonna lose my vein purchase. I'm gonna lose access to the vein, so what am I gonna do? Look at the angle of that needle. Very high, but the guide wire is going in and it's following through. Great. That's what the guide wire is supposed to do. But I'm like, something's stuck. I can't feel it. Oops, this needs to stay together. Insert at a high angle. The guide wire is kind of going through. Actually, I lost access. So let's retract that guide wire, put that needle back in, get that guide wire in. Guide wire is nice and smooth, beautiful. Okay. Goes in smooth. Now, my angle is pretty high, but I'm going to insert anyways. And you're like, it feels kind of off. It doesn't feel right. It's not going in smooth. It's doing weird things. I don't get flashback. I don't see flashback. So then you try to retract it. You try to pull it back. And we're going to see what that looks like here. When you try to pull that catheter back while it's at a high angle, we're going to go at it from the GoPro. And you try to pull that catheter back, you're going to rip that catheter and shear it. Because you try to retract that needle or that catheter at a very high angle. So you don't want to retract that catheter. You have to pull everything, leave that catheter where it is, and pull everything out together so that it comes out in a linear fashion and not like in a curved fashion. So don't retract that catheter while the catheter is bent, or else you'll shear it like this, and then you'll have lots of issues. So if you have complications for whatever reason during the insertion, it's not going in, feels really funky, there's no blood return, retract everything together. Don't pull just the catheter back. Another thing that was probably happening is this. Did you guys see how when I lost access with the needle, the catheter wasn't pushing through? That's another thing that might be happening. So let's insert into the vein. We got in. We're in the vein. Okay, we're barely in because it was so deep, it was hard to get to, but we got that much in. Great. While you're moving and manipulating all this stuff, watch how the needle comes. If that needle ever comes out of the vein, do you guys see that? That is the needle outside of the vein officially, okay? The needle's outside of the vein, but the guide wire maintains access. And you try to advance that catheter, especially when that catheter is too far out. You're going to have issues, and look at how much that tissue's having a hard time. That catheter's having a hard time puncturing back into the vein. That's another thing I believe a lot of people are missing, is that the guide wire helps to guide the catheter when it's in the vein. However, if your needle has lost access, there is a chance that the guide wire is not enough to help that catheter go through into the vein. And so because the vein tissue is so tough, because the needle did not maintain access, there's nothing hard guiding that catheter, because the guide wire for this AST device is too thin. It's going to bend to the will of the tissue and not allow the catheter to bend with the guide wire. Basically, you still need to maintain access with the needle. If you lost access because you relied on the guide wire, it's not good enough. You're going to lose access and you're going to bend that catheter, and then you're going to retract it like what's going on, and then you're going to shear that catheter through with the needle. So be mindful of that. So there's your ultrasound simulation. Very cheap, very easy to set up, and the person can just wreck this simulation model. It's just $10 and they'll get as many reps as they need to be proficient. So I'm hoping that this will be useful for some of you guys, or especially if you're on a tight budget or you have no budget, and hopefully the hospital or the institution will be able to afford $10 worth of chicken and $10 worth of balloons. So at least they'll give you that so that our clinicians will be better skilled, more skilled in insertion practice. So all the links to the supplies and where you can get it, so you don't have to go searching for it, is in the link under the description. It is an affiliate link, so I do get paid a little bit off of commission for the sale. It does not affect your buying or purchasing price at all. So go ahead, go to those sites. It'll help support this channel. It'll help support me showing you all these crazy things, save money, be more efficient and better skilled in your practice. So help a brother out, and let me know what else do you want me to make a video on.